Today on Back to the Bible, Bryan Clark takes you to Proverbs 12 to see how living wisely can help you make a genuine impact on the culture around you. Later, he'll bring that message home as he steps into the studio with some take-home points and encouragement for your life. Today's study takes us to Proverbs 12, starting with verse 20. Here's Bryan Clark.
Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but counselors of peace have joy. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, and that's contrasted with the shalom in the second part of the verse. Basically, what it's saying is I may present myself as being a person of compassion, a person who cares, a person who's concerned about injustice and unfairness and things that aren't right. But at the end of the day, what I'm really about is advancing my cause. I'm about an agenda. I'm about myself and my career and my notoriety. This is my chance to get in the spotlight and make a name for myself. Ultimately, what I'm doing is I am disadvantaging those in need in order to advantage myself and my cause. It isn't true compassion or justice. The atheist German philosopher Nietzsche had some good things to say, and he had some really bad things to say. But one of the things I think Nietzsche had right is, by and large, people are about power and control. Religion is about power and control. Government is about power and control. A lot of the marketplace is about power and control. I think it was right about that. You think about then people who present themselves as being all about justice, but really they're wanting to advance their cause. It's about using others for power and control to ultimately get my way. That's what the proverb is talking about. What's contrasted are the counselors of peace have joy. That word peace is our Hebrew word shalom that we've been talking about. It's this idea of mutual flourishing. Hey, we're all in this together. We all either flourish together or we all go down together. But you ultimately live in the culture you create. The counselors of shalom is basically saying the righteous are those who aren't pushing any other agenda other than they just genuinely want flourishing. And when they create a context where people can flourish, there is joy, there's satisfaction, there's this glimpse that satisfies something deep within our soul that says this is the way it was supposed to be. So the fourth and last, so we've talked about we need to be teachable, we've talked about a biblical view of work, we've talked about true compassion and justice. The last is a topic that we have talked about quite a bit because it comes up quite a bit in Proverbs, and that is what comes out of my mouth. You say, Bryan, you've really talked about that quite a bit already. I agree, but it's talked about more than any other subject in the book of Proverbs under the umbrella of skillful living. If you can't control your mouth, you have virtually no chance at skillful living. So what this proverb talks about is the power of words to destroy and the power of words to heal. Powerful both ways. Verse 6, the words of the wicked lie in wait for blood, but the mouth of the upright will deliver them. Very similar, verse 13, an evil man is ensnared by the transgression of his lips, but the righteous will escape from trouble. Both of those verses use a trap metaphor, like going out and setting a trap and baiting a trap. It's basically this idea that the wicked bait the trap. They're just waiting for someone to step in it in order for them to pounce. The fool falls for it. The fool gets drawn in to this toxic war of words that destroys the shalom in a community. The second proverb was saying, but ultimately, when the fool does that, they end up stepping in their own trap because you ultimately live in the culture you create. We either all go down or we all flourish together. There are certain people that it feels like they're always right on the edge of going off. And you just know that. Think with me, aren't there certain people that you know if you take them into any social context, there's a pretty good chance someone's gonna say something and they're gonna go off and create uncomfortable conflict. And you always know they're just right on the edge of that. These are people that just seem to thrive on this. It's almost like they draw energy from this conflict. What the Proverbs says, the righteous aren't like that. I'm not stepping in that trap. I'm not taking the bait. I'm not going to do that. We need to be more skilled than to fall for that in whatever environment you're in. Wouldn't it be equally true that we all know people that we could take into any social environment and you have a high level of confidence that no matter what is said there, they're not going to go off at the mouth. They're just too skilled to fall for that. There's certain people, there is conflict everywhere they go. Conflict at home, conflict at work, conflict in the neighborhood, conflict in their small group. There's just conflict everywhere. That's what the proverb is talking about. Verse 14, a man will be satisfied with good by the fruit of his words, and the deeds of a man's hands will return to him. Basically, the reminder we all ultimately live in the culture we create. If what comes out of my mouth is shalom, that's typically what is returned to me. I live in the culture that I create. Verse 16, a fool's anger is known at once, but a prudent man conceals or covers dishonor. Basically talking about the fool has a quick fuse. The fool is always this close to going off. The fool has a problem with his or her temper. The reason he or she is a fool is because you ultimately create a culture that will destroy you. Now, I thought about this week, and I think my statement is accurate. I don't believe over my lifetime I have ever known anyone with a temper problem who was happy. I don't think I have. The reason is because someone who can't control his or her temper ultimately lives in the culture you've created, and it's a miserable way to live. There is conflict at home, there's conflict in the marriage, there's conflict with your kids, there's conflict in the neighborhood, there's conflict at church, there's conflict in your small group, there's conflict at work, there's conflict everywhere. It's a miserable way to live, and I don't think I've ever known someone with a temper problem that was happy. So it's the way of the fool. The prudent man conceals or covers dishonor. Dishonor means something that is offensive. It means something that not only is offensive, but might be a put down or an attack or something like that. The prudent person, the righteous, the person who lives skillfully, even if there's something that's offensive, even if there's some sort of an attack or an insult, they're too skillful to get sucked into that and contribute to the breakdown of shalom. So think of it this way. All of us as Christians are called to be a light out into the darkness, which means we're called to be among people that don't believe what we believe, that don't think what we think, that don't share our values. They are often going to say things that are offensive. They're often going to say things that are insulting. They're often going to attack and oftentimes attack you personally. If you can't be in that environment without going off at the mouth, you stand virtually no chance of doing your part to fulfill the Great Commission. You have to have more skill than that. Whether it's face-to-face or whether it's on social media, you have to have enough skill not to get sucked into that. What if I choose not to respond to somebody's insult today, and a week from now, I'm able to enter into a meaningful conversation with that same person that begins a journey to talk about Jesus? That's what the proverb is talking about.
We're happy to have you with us today, and we'll return to more of Bryan Clark's teaching in just a moment. In the meantime, we invite you to discover our wide selection of Bible studies, devotions, and reading plans, all free and all available at backtothebible.org. You can also sign up for Go Tandem, the app that brings God's Word to your laptop or phone throughout your day. Find out more at backtothebible.org. That's backtothebible.org. Here's Bryan Clark to continue today's study from Proverbs 12.
Verse 17, he who speaks truth tells what is right, but a false witness deceit. Verse 17 is courtroom language. It's simply talking about a righteous witness tells the truth simply because it's right. But the false witness lies in order to somehow advantage himself, herself, or a cause. We've talked about this already. It is the reminder that truth has to matter. We live in a culture that has said there is no absolute truth. Therefore, we've devalued truth. Therefore, we are no longer offended by the lie, and everybody shrugs his shoulder, and that's just the way it is. But at the end of the day, without truth, there is virtually no possibility for flourishing, no possibility for justice, no possibility for compassion. Just like in a marriage, there's just no possibility for flourishing when the two partners won't speak truth. I don't know that I expect the culture at large to get this, but we are the people of God. The one who dwells within us defines himself as the way, the truth, and the life. We have to be people of truth. We have to demand it from ourselves, from our spouses, from our kids, from our pastors, from our churches, from our leaders, from our politicians. We cannot accept anything less. People need to tell the truth. A couple of years ago, I was at a conference, and there was a well-known pastor who was talking about being on television show. I think it was ABC's Good Morning America, talking about traditional marriage, and was on there with someone basically talking against traditional marriage. And he said as soon as the interview started, the other person just went off and cited all kinds of studies and statistics of the damage that traditional marriage does, and the damage it does to communities and people and children, and basically consumed the time, and they went to a commercial. And that was it. They were ushered off. In the green room, the pastor said, he tried to politely say to this other person, I want to keep learning. I want to keep growing. I'm not familiar with those studies and statistics. I would like to learn more about that. Could you help me find those studies? And he said the person didn't bat an eye, just simply said, oh, none of that's true. I just made it all up. Said, I will do whatever is necessary to win. I would suggest to you that happens all the time, and everybody goes with it. And nobody really thinks that person is lying. We must be people of truth. Verse 18, there is one who speaks rashly, like the thrust of a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. It's a very vivid imagery that those that speak rashly, recklessly, hurtfully, It's like taking a sword and piercing someone again and again and leaving them bleeding. Isn't it true? We can all think of words that were said to us a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, that were hurtful and unkind, and there's still some bleeding that comes out of that scar when you think about it. Words are so powerful, but they're also powerful for healing, which is the second part of that proverb. But the tongue of the wise brings healing. If we don't get baited into those destructive conversations, but rather we're skillful enough to offer words of healing, it is equally powerful. Probably most of us, if not all of us, can remember things said a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago. There were words that brought healing and encouragement and life to our souls. And here we are 30 years later, and we still remember those words. There is tremendous power in words. Several years ago, there was a little encounter in the hallway. To be honest, I don't even remember it. But the person I encountered told me this several months later. Apparently, he came up to me. He said, I'm new today, and I'm sorry about the way I'm dressed. And I said, I think you look great, and I'm glad you're here this morning. That was the whole exchange right there. I did not know this person was homeless, wandered in our doors. And he said something triggered in his brain when I said, I think you look great. I'm glad you're here. Something triggered that said, I don't have to live this way. I can live a different life. And it turned him. Got a job, got a house, and about a year later, I had the privilege of baptizing him on this stage. That was less than a 30-second exchange that just reminds us there is so much power in our words. Verse 19, truthful lips will be established forever, but a lying tongue is only for the moment. Verse 22, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who deal faithfully are his delight. Verse 25, anxiety in a man's heart weighs it down, but a good word makes it glad. I think there's no shortage of anxiety in our culture today, which means when we offer good, encouraging, healing words, it is a powerful language in our culture. Why does all this matter so much? Verse 26, the righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. Verse 28, in the way of righteousness is life, and in its pathway there is no death. The life that our souls long for is found in righteousness. It's found in flourishing. It's found in shalom, which is ultimately then found in a relationship with Christ. But the wicked are determined to lead people astray, and the wicked are winning the culture. Why this matters is because we as the people of God have been called to represent the righteous, to at least create glimpses, pockets of flourishing in our cities. What a vision or a dream that one day we could actually win the city. Not a hostile takeover, we win the city. And the city rejoices because people say, I think this is what my soul is longing for. And it creates an opportunity to exalt Christ the Savior.
Up next, Bryan joins us in studio to offer you some encouraging take-home points from today's message.
So we're talking about just practical ways we can help create shalom. Yesterday we talked about being teachable, talked about our work. Today we want to talk about justice, true justice, which is our Hebrew word mishpat. There's a lot of talk in our culture about justice and social justice, but if you really listen to it, most of it is justice for people that agree with me. But true justice is different than that. A couple of years ago, I was in Israel and had built a relationship with our guide, and the night before he had shared with our group his belief that there's no absolute truth or morality and that everything's relative and all truth is equally true. And so the next day we went through the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, and we happened to go through first, and we're waiting for the rest of our group. And I asked him the question, based on what he shared the night before with the group, what would be the basis by which he would say what Hitler did to the Jews was evil? And he kind of looked at me and he said, well, of course it was evil. And I said, well, in my worldview, it is evil. But if there is no absolute truth or morality, if Hitler thought that it was the right thing to do, then what gives you the right to say it was wrong? And he just stared at me and he said, I'd never really thought about that. I think that's a huge problem in our culture. People want justice. I think they're very sincere in that. But you can't get there without absolute truth and morality. So there has to be a value for truth and morality, for justice to win the day. So think about it for you. You can't change the world, but as a boss, as an employer, as a teacher, as a coach, as a parent, as a neighbor, what would true justice look like for you? A lot of people today are involved in causes, but they're only involved in causes enough to make them feel better. But if you're going to be serious about justice and making a difference, you really have to roll up your sleeves, get in the mess, and work hard. It's not easy, but that is all part of justice in the world. The last one was one we've talked about before, and that's the importance of our mouth, considering the words that are coming out of our mouth, and do they bring encouragement and healing, or do they bring brokenness and destruction? So we have a chance every day, just based on the words that come out of our mouths, to do damage or to bring about great healing and compassion. So in the midst of a culture full of so much anger, I would suggest, I think that provides a tremendous opportunity to provide something different, something better that I would suggest is what people are longing for. So I leave you with this thought. I'm sure there's someone around you today who needs some words of encouragement and kindness. Maybe start there and just see what happens.
Thanks for listening. Come back tomorrow as Bryan shares more wisdom to help you move forward in faith, here on Back to the Bible. If you'd like to listen again, visit backtothebible.org or find us on your favorite podcast app.